Imagine trying to execute this, like massive, super complex software update on your smartphone when the battery's flashing red at 2%.
Right, you just wouldn't do it.
Exactly. No matter how critical that update is, you know the hardware simply doesn't have the juice to complete the task without completely crashing. You'd plug it in first.
You'd have to.
Yeah, but yet every single morning, millions of us basically ignore the biological hardware we were born with. We pour the absolute wrong type of scheduling demands into our severely depleted systems, and then we sit around wondering why we crash in the middle of the afternoon.
Because we treat human energy as this infinite resource that can just be commanded by sheer willpower or, corporate policy, which biologically is completely backward.
So backward. Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. We're so glad you're here. Today we're pulling from some really phenomenal source material, excerpts from 15, tapping into your team's circadian rhythms. And our mission for you today is to radically rethink the daily grind.
Completely dismantle it, really. Whether you're an executive trying to dodge burnout or just someone trying to figure out why 3:00 p.m. feels like hitting a brick wall, this is for you.
Totally. We're uncovering how true productivity isn't actually about time management. It's about energy management. We're mapping our workdays to biological realities rather than, well, corporate fictions. Okay, let's unpack this. The core premise here is that we all have these inescapable biological dispositions governing our focus and our emotions, right?
Right. To really understand how to apply this, we have to look at the underlying physiological architecture, what sleep scientists call your chronotype.
Which is more than just liking mornings or evenings.
Exactly. A chronotype isn't just a preference or a habit. It's actually a genetic hardwiring dictated by this cluster of thousands of cells in your hypothalamus.
The suprachiasmatic nucleus.
Yes, the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Say that 3 times fast. It acts as your body's master clock. Now, most people know the extremes, right? I have the larks.
The early birds.
Right. They experience these early morning spikes in cortisol and core body temperature. And then on the other end, the night owls, whose melatonin clearance and cognitive peaks happen significantly later in the day.
But the research highlights this massive third cohort that gets completely ignored in standard corporate scheduling. The vulnerable lark, or what they call the intermediate finch.
I love that term. The intermediate finch represents a huge portion of the workforce.
Wait, really? A huge portion?
Oh, absolutely. These are people whose core body temperature and alertness actually peak in the mid to late afternoon. Their cortisol spike is delayed compared to a lark.
Okay, so what does that mean for their workday?
It means their prime window for really deep, high-fidelity cognitive processing doesn't even open until around 2:00 or 3:00 p.m. But crucially, all of these chronotypes, the larks, owls, finches, they are stable biological traits.
Treating chronotypes like they're just a matter of discipline it's like treating shoe sizes as a suggestion.
That is a perfect way to look at it.
Right. Like you can't just train your feet to fit into a size 7 if you're size 10. I don't care how trendy the shoe is or how hard you try.
You literally cannot systematically train an owl's master clock to behave like a lark's any more than you can change your eye color through sheer willpower.
But workplace culture almost violently demands that everyone operate on that exact same early morning size 7 shoe. The source calls this the systemic bias of morningness.
And what's fascinating here is how this biological bias operates invisibly as a moral judgment.
Oh, totally.
We have basically conflated the timing of someone's energy with the actual presence of competence. The corporate world inherently distrusts afternoon energy.
You see this everywhere on social media too, like that whole 5 to 9 before your 9 to 5 trend.
Oh, the influencer videos.
Yes. Influencers posting these manicured perfect videos, waking up at 4:30 a.m., drinking a kale smoothie, running 8 miles, and reading a biography before the sun is even up.
Right, and society equates that specific pre-dawn routine with moral superiority.
Exactly. If you aren't doing that, the implication is just that you lack discipline. You're lazy.
Which leads directly to disastrous managerial outcomes. The text actually provides this highly illustrative case study of a mid-sized consulting team. It's led by a guy named Steve.
And Steve is a pronounced lark, right?
Yes. Steve's cognitive peak hits hard around 8:00 a.m., But he has a senior analyst, Lisa, who is an owl.
Classic mismatch.
Totally. So during their 9:00 a.m. strategy meetings, Lisa is experiencing what scientists call sleep inertia. Her melatonin hasn't fully cleared her system yet.
So her prefrontal cortex is effectively running in low power mode.
Right. So Steve observes her quiet demeanor in the meeting and interprets it as a lack of commitment. He thinks she's disengaged.
Meanwhile, let's look at the afternoon. By 4:00 p.m., Lisa is finally hitting her neurological stride. She is processing data rapidly, connecting the dots, sending Steve these really complex questions.
But by 4:00 p.m., Steve's cortisol levels have just plummeted. His executive function is completely depleted.
So when Lisa approaches him, he's terse, he's dismissive, and he just ignores her evening emails.
And Lisa walks away thinking Steve is this unapproachable bottleneck who doesn't care about the project.
But the friction here has absolutely nothing to do with their actual talent or their dedication. It is entirely a failure of sequencing.
Exactly. The deeply flawed assumption in modern management is that biological realities shouldn't factor into performance evaluations. Steve is evaluating Lisa's biology and calling it a character flaw.
Because if you're operating with a depleted prefrontal cortex like Steve in the afternoon, trying to evaluate talent or resolve complex issues is just dangerous.
It really is.
Which brings us to the individual application. Because before any manager can orchestrate a whole team's schedule, they have to fix their own oxygen mask first. You have to become a highly self-aware leader.
Meaning you have to map your own highest stakes work to your biological peaks. Things like sensitive performance reviews, strategic sprint planning, or mediating conflict.
Because during a circadian trough, your brain physically changes how it operates, doesn't it?
It does. The prefrontal cortex, which handles executive function and impulse control, begins to literally power down to conserve energy.
And when that happens, the amygdala takes over.
Right. The amygdala drives emotional reactive responses. So if you attempt a sensitive negotiation during your biological slump, you are neurologically predisposed to misread social cues or just lose your temper.
Okay, I get the theory, but let's look at the real-world dilemma you face as a manager here. If I go to my team and say, hey, everyone, I'm currently in a biological trough. My prefrontal cortex is shutting down, so I'm logging off at 2:00 p.m. I mean, I'm terrified they're going to think I'm slacking.
Sure, that's the corporate fear.
Right. Corporate culture tells us leaders have to be the rock. Always available, always on. Doesn't stepping back make you look like a disengaged manager?
Well, you have to redefine what being on actually means. Being visibly present while you are cognitively impaired damages your reputation far more than being strategically absent.
Oh, that's a great point.
The source highlights that low energy periods shouldn't just be downtime. They are actually the optimal window for delegation.
So you shift your role.
Exactly. When you hit a trough, you intentionally shift from a supervisory, controlling posture into a light touch advisory role. You hand the reins to an employee who is currently peaking.
Which gives them autonomy.
Right. It fulfills their psychological need for skill mastery, while you conserve your remaining cognitive load for decisions that strictly require your authority. You aren't disappearing. You are orchestrating.
There's this brilliant structural methodology for this mentioned in the text regarding Johannes Thomas. He's the CEO of Trivago.
A massive, fast-moving tech company.
Exactly. Moving at lightning speed.
Yeah.
But his calendar strategy is surgical. He identifies as someone who needs intense morning focus. So he keeps his mornings entirely meeting-free.
He protects those high-fidelity cognitive hours with an iron fist.
He does. He uses them for deep, complex analytical work. And he deliberately pushes all of his interactions, his one-on-ones, to the afternoon when his analytical brain is cooling down, but his social energy is still functional.
He didn't just decide to work more hours to get everything done. He placed the work better.
Place the work better. I love that. But if you've mastered your own calendar, the complexity multiplies when you look at your team. I mean, how do you orchestrate a department where you have larks, owls, and intermediate finches whose peaks are just scattered all over the clock?
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. You don't have to guess or rely on people just self-reporting how they feel.
Because feelings are subjective.
Right. Leaders can utilize rigorously validated psychometric tools. The source highlights two major ones, the MEQ, which is the morningness, eveningness questionnaire.
Okay, and the other one?
The MCTQ, the Munich chronotype questionnaire. And it's important to understand how these tools differ from just a standard fun personality quiz.
Like those quizzes that tell you what kind of pizza topping you are.
Exactly. It's not that. The MEQ assesses your physiological preferences, when you naturally prefer to eat, exercise, and focus. But the MCTQ goes much deeper. It measures your actual sleep behavior on your free days compared to your heavily scheduled work days.
So it looks at what you do when you don't have an alarm clock yelling at you.
Right. By calculating the difference between those days, it identifies your exact mid-sleep phase. This tells a manager precisely where your biological midnight is.
Wow.
It reveals the exact hours your brain is most primed for complex collaboration versus when you are fundamentally compromised.
And when you run a whole team through the MCTQ, the data just shatters the illusion of the standard 9-to-5 workday.
Completely shatters it.
In the modern, highly digital workplace, the actual shared overlap, the window where every single chronotype on your team is awake, alert, and capable of high-stakes collaboration is shockingly small. We are no longer looking at an 8-hour block.
Not at all. That optimal window compresses to roughly 10:00 a.m. to 2:00 p.m., or maybe 11:00 a.m. to 3:00 p.m.
Exactly 4 hours.
Those 4 hours are your golden window for synchronous work. That is when you schedule your rigorous debates, your strategy alignments, and your complex project kickoffs. The larks haven't crashed, the finches are ramping up, and the owls are fully online.
But work obviously still happens outside of those 4 golden hours.
Yeah.
This requires distinguishing between synchronous and asynchronous tasks.
Yes, the text details a fantastic scenario of an engineering manager coordinating a massive overnight cloud migration.
Oh, that's right. The kind of high wire act where just one drop table in a database brings down the entire company.
High stakes. So for the actual execution phase, the intensive synchronous trench work where real-time coordination is mandatory, the manager has to partner with someone sharing his exact neurobiological peak.
So if that manager is an intermediate finch peaking between 4:00 p.m. and 8:00 p.m., he needs a secondary engineer who also peaks between 4:00 p.m. and 8:00 p.m.
They have to be in lockstep. Their prefrontal cortex is firing at the exact same frequency to catch real-time errors.
I look at that synchronous phase like a three-legged race. You have your legs tied together, so if you aren't matching your partner's exact physiological stride, you are both going to faceplant.
That's a great analogy.
But what happens the day after the migration?
That shifts to the asynchronous phase. This is the 24-hour post-migration monitoring period. If a critical server fails at 3:00 a.m., somebody has to be completely alert to mitigate the damage.
So for this phase, the manager pairs up with an employee possessing an opposing chronotype.
Exactly. It stops being a three-legged race and becomes a relay race.
The manager runs his leg, and the moment his alertness falls off a cliff, he hands the baton to the night owl, who's just hitting maximum velocity.
And the manager gets to log off and neurologically recover, while the company maintains round-the-clock, high-fidelity responsiveness.
Without forcing anyone to just stare at a monitor for 24 hours straight until they start hallucinating.
Right. And we see the macro-level success of this approach in organizations like the Boston Consulting Group. BCG instituted a framework called predictable time off.
And historically, consulting cultures just demand raw, brutal endurance.
Oh, yeah. But BCG structurally engineered the work around biological recovery.
So how did that predictable time off actually function on the ground? Because it wasn't just HR telling people to take a Friday off, right?
Precisely. It was surgically applied downtime based on chronobiology. They created distinct, protected recovery windows that aligned with individual biological needs.
Give me an example of how that looked.
Well, if you were a lark on the consulting team, your evenings were strictly protected. So you could recover when your system was already powering down naturally.
And for the owls.
If you were an owl, your mornings were protected from rapid response demands. They mapped the workflow so that tasks were handed off to whoever was naturally hitting their peak at that given hour.
So they just stopped fighting the biology.
They did, and the metrics were undeniable. Higher operational efficiency, significantly better client satisfaction scores, and a massive drop in employee turnover.
Because when you stop chemically torturing your employees with mismatched schedules, their brains produce better work, and they don't quit.
It proves that structural recovery is a strategic imperative, not just an HR perk. But, you know, as robust as predictable time off is, corporate reality is messy. Methodical relay races are ideal when you have the luxury of a project timeline.
But what happens when an unforeseen crisis detonates? When flexibility is entirely stripped away? Those hair-on-fire emergencies where the timeline is dictated by an external force.
Right. When a team is forced to execute urgent work outside their natural cognitive peaks, the source dictates that leaders must declare a high-risk operating mode.
High-risk operating mode. meaning you have to acknowledge that the team's collective executive function is compromised.
Decision quality drops. The ability to foresee long-term consequences basically evaporates, and attention to detail plummets.
So what do you do?
In high-risk operating mode, leaders have to deploy rigid structural guardrails. You mandate the use of strict checklists, you conduct premortems, and you require a mandatory second set of eyes for any irreversible decision.
A premortem is such a vital tool here. Instead of just hoping things go well, the team sits down before executing and assumes the project has already catastrophically failed.
Right, you look at the disaster before it happens.
Then they work backward to identify what caused the failure. You have to do this because a biologically tired brain cannot organically anticipate risk. It physically lacks the energy to run complex predictive modeling.
Which is exactly why the second set of eyes protocol is non-negotiable for irreversible decisions, like pushing a final pricing change live to an e-commerce site or submitting a massive regulatory filing.
The source material actually has an incredible case study about this involving a cross-border deal team.
Oh, the regulator question.
Yes, they received this massive complex question from a financial regulator at 8:00 p.m., and the comprehensive response is due at 7 a.m. the next morning.
Now, the traditional archaic corporate response is the all-hands all-nighter.
Yeah, you order stale pizza, everyone stays in the conference room, and you collectively suffer through the night out of a misguided sense of solidarity.
Which guarantees a response absolutely riddled with errors because half the team is neurologically asleep with their eyes open.
Right. So what do they do instead?
Instead, this leadership team utilized smart sequencing. They assigned the time-sensitive data gathering and initial drafting exclusively to two extreme night owls.
Because those owls are peaking anyway.
Exactly. Those owls worked from 8:00 p.m. until midnight, effectively operating within their cognitive prime. They drafted the response, did an initial quality check, and then wrote a highly specific handoff memo detailing where the gaps were.
And then they just went to sleep.
They went to sleep. Then, at 5:30 a.m., the extreme larks on the team wake up.
They are entirely refreshed, operating on a full battery.
They read the handoff memo, finalize the financial models, adjust the tone of the communication, and submit a flawless document before the 7:00 a.m. deadline.
No one pulled an all-nighter. No one was forced to perform complex cognitive labor while biologically compromised. It was pure, efficient sequencing.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the chronic lack of this biological sequencing in sectors like investment banking and global law is systematically destroying long-term performance.
Because chronic circadian misalignment doesn't just make people tired.
No, it causes a physiological erosion of a team's capacity to process information. Citigroup actually realized this when evaluating their global securities trade settlement model.
The traditional always-on mentality was physically breaking their top performers, wasn't it?
It was. So they restructured the entire system into morning response pods and evening response pods across different time zones.
Engineering a continuous chain of processing.
Right. They did this without ever asking the same individual to stretch across multiple biological troughs. The work continued uninterrupted 24 hours a day, perfectly aligning with the peak periods of the specific pods.
And the result?
A drastic reduction in settlement errors and significantly faster processing times, all while protecting the neurobiological health of their staff.
And let's be entirely pragmatic about the current labor market here.
Right.
The younger generation of professionals entering the workforce deeply understands this.
They do. They have zero patience for the old model.
They look at an 80-hour week fueled by sleep deprivation and caffeine, not as a badge of honor, but as a glaring failure of structural management.
If organizations want to attract and retain elite talent, they have to demonstrate that they know how to engineer high performance sustainably. You can't just exploit raw stamina anymore.
Sustainability requires aligning the demands of the role with the physiological realities of the human performing it.
Perfectly said.
So, what does this all mean for you as you look at your calendar for tomorrow? It means that adopting circadian-informed leadership doesn't require you to wait for some massive top-down HR overhaul.
No, you can start this at the micro level.
It's about looking at the tasks on your desk and making deliberate choices about the timing of friction. It's shifting that complex budget reconciliation to your peak cognitive window and pushing your routine email responses to your trough.
It's asking your team when they feel sharpest and orchestrating the handoffs accordingly.
Work shouldn't be an endless endurance test. It should be a series of biologically well-timed demands.
And as you begin to map your own biological blueprint, I want to leave you with a broader, slightly more provocative question to consider.
Let's hear it.
We have established through rigorous chronobiological data that human beings are fundamentally hardwired to reach their cognitive and creative peaks at drastically different times of the day.
Right, science proves this.
So if that variance is an inescapable scientific fact, how much of our standardized early morning education system and our rigid 9-to-5 corporate architecture is actively suppressing human potential and global innovation simply because it demands we all run on the exact same clock?
Wow. We are forcing millions of completely unique engines to run on the exact same fuel at the exact same hour and then penalizing them when they break down.
We really are.
It is time to stop fighting the hardware. Figure out how your engine is actually built and finally start running it on the right fuel. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.